sin from their family and children as they might learn from them. What is he talking about? Yes? Oh, the lights, yes, please. So what is he talking about here? What reason does he have, or what reason does he give? That he said that this reason alone is relevant. Oh, whoops. When it comes to displaying acts of obedience. What reason? So what should be what is the driving force behind that shyness? Is that so you don't set an example? So essentially he's saying that this reason is relevant when it comes to displaying acts of obedience, because you don't want to set an example and you don't want to normalize it. And we had talked about this idea of normalizing sin and how it's such a problem and how it's such an issue. Because if sin becomes normalized, what happens? Okay. All right. And I'm saying, okay, like lying becomes normal, then what? So what? Right, society starts falling apart. Like when you start losing that social fabric and you start losing that trust, like society falls apart. And even if we look at the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala prohibits us from, like what are the things that are agreed upon that are prohibited? Okay, alcohol, lying, what else? Backbiting, adultery, stealing, right? Tale carrying, namima, murder. And if we understand that all of those things are agreed upon to be prohibited, what do a lot of those things have in common?
It causes fear in society.
Right, it causes distrust in society. And if we understand that these things cause distrust in society, it doesn't allow people to function. And one of the first things that causes a breakdown in society is this is that corruption, is that distrust that happens. If we start losing trust in our institutions, what happens? So if I don't trust the police, what am I not going to do? Right? So I'm going to start acting however I want, because I know that there's no repercussions. If I don't trust the judicial system, or if I don't trust how I'm being taxed, what am I going to try to do? I'm going to try to avoid taxes. If things are easy, or let me put it this way. If I go through all these loops and I go through all these difficulties and blah, 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 and I find out after spending 5 hours that I only saved $100 in my taxes, am I going to go through that again? No. Right? I was like, okay, you know what? It's actually easier just to pay, right? Just to pay it and just to get rid of it. And that's just how we are as human beings, right? We're always looking for the path of least resistance, right? We don't like running into issues. We don't like running into problems. We like handling things in a very straightforward and a very easy manner. And the easier it is, it's easier for us to replicate and do that. So if there are 2 stores, and one I have to wait in line for like 3 hours to save like $5, and the other one I'm in and out very quickly, what will most people choose? Right? They'll just like, man, you know what? It's not even worth it saving a few cents. I'm going to go over there. So when we choose the path of least resistance, this is something that's really important for us to keep in mind, even when we create our own institutions, even within our own families. If for my children, I want them to do good, and I want them to stay away from bad, so what are some things that I should implement in my home? All right, setting good examples for sure, but in light of what we had just been discussing and talking about. Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is part of setting example. I'm sorry, set rules. Okay, cool. Like what? Mm-hmm. All right, so I think being clear in the messaging. Absolutely, 100%. I agree with that. It's very important for me to be clear in my expectations for my children so that they know what it is that I want from them. Should I have a list of very convoluted, difficult rules that are there to follow? Like between 6:15 and 6:23, you cannot watch, and if you watch, then what's going to happen if I start making the rules very difficult and convoluted? They're not going to follow them. Why? because they're going to find it overwhelming, and they're not going to, and then this is something that we as children, right? And even when we get adults, well, that's not what? It's not fair. It's important. Even for us, when we don't feel something is fair, what happens? We have less issue violating it because we don't see the value behind it. When we see something is not fair, we have no problem challenging it. When we see something is not fair, we have no problem going against it. So if I want my children to do good, I should facilitate good for them. I should allow them to do good. I should make it easier for them. And when they do good, what should I do? How should I respond? I should reward them. And what do rewards look like? Giving them $1 every time they do something good? Affirmation, right? As simple as that. Just tell, like, you know what, I'm proud of you. Good job. I'm glad you did that. And if they do something wrong, punishments. Does the punishment need to be like, I'm going to unplug the internet every single time?
Why not?
So if
Verbal warning.
okay, right? Like, so verbal admonishment, that's something that's completely fine. But if my son lies or steals or hits somebody or says something or is abusive, and every response I have is, I'm going to take away the internet, what happens? Right? Eventually he's going to stop caring because he's going to start losing value for the internet, for that thing. It's like, okay, fine, yeah, take it away. But if my son or daughter feels that they're disappointing me, that's one way of doing it. But what is another way of me presenting it? Is by helping them develop a connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why is that so important? So yeah, obviously understanding that they're disappointing me as a father or as a mother, right? Why is it important for them to have that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? It helps them work. How? So if I just made it about me, and it's like, okay, well, Baba doesn't like when I lie, Baba doesn't like when I don't pray, and I try shifting that to Allah, how does that help? That helps their moral compass, but how? Right. Okay. Taib. That's good. What else? So I'm shifting it away from me. It's not about me. And what else? That's it? That's all you guys got?
A higher purpose.
Right, a higher purpose. And not just that, having them recognize and realize, like, okay, well, this is the being that we worship. Right? This is actually the one we don't want to disappoint. Because many times what happens in a lot of families is that we as parents, because we're not religiously versed, what do I try to enforce on my children? What values? Okay, mine. And usually my values are based off of what? Culture. And if my culture is foreign to my children, how much value will that culture have for them? Not much at all. Because they're like, why? Because it's something that is foreign to them. But if I help them recognize Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how foreign is that? Not only is it not foreign, this is something that we call fitri. Right? So when we talk about the fitrah is what? It's a national, like that natural innate ability, right? Right, that natural recognition that we all have as individuals, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has placed in every single one of us. That fitrah, is it to be inclined toward a particular culture? No. And subhanAllah, when I remember being upset that I had this cultural gap between like myself and my parents. They were immigrants, I was born and raised here, and there was this huge cultural gap. I was like, inshallah, when I have kids, I won't have that problem. And I don't. Like, I don't have a cultural problem with my kids. But I do have an age and a generation gap that I didn't take into account. لا إله إلا الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So it's important for us to create those pathways for our children to love and respect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because even though there might be certain gaps that will be removed between us and our children, it doesn't mean that there are going to be other types of gaps. And like, what do we mean by generation gaps? There are words and phrases that my children use that I'm completely unfamiliar with. The age gap means that there are going to be things that they're interested in at a certain age that I won't be, right? So if they like Transformer toys, maybe I'm, you know what I mean? Because of my age, I'm beyond that, where I'm not interested in playing with toys. So there's always going to be those gaps, but the only gap that doesn't exist is the one that we help them create between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And what is the easiest way for me to fill that gap? So if I've gotten to a point, or maybe I've raised my children, or maybe I have siblings, and I feel that there's a gap or there's a distance between them and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, how do we fill it? What do we fill it with? Fill it with love. It's the only way. And that's the glue, that's going to be the connection between that. And when I mean love, it's actually showing love, right? It's actually showing it. Showing love, showing affection, words of affirmation, things that we can do to help teach and instill that in others. Because that is the only pathway to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? That's the only way. I'm not going to scare someone into having a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is being afraid of Allah something that's important? Yeah, absolutely, right? It's something that's inherent and something that's in us. And not like a fear like I'm scared of lions or scared of the dark type fear, but a fear that I don't want Allah to be displeased with me. I don't want Allah to punish me, right? Like, those things are definitely there. But in order to even get to that point, I need to love Him Azza wa Jal first. And if I don't ever teach my children how to express love, if I don't ever teach others how to show love, there's no way for them to ever make that connection, because it's such an important part of the relationship that we have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the moment that gap is filled with that, everything else falls into place. Everything else becomes really easy. Because essentially what we want for ourselves, what we want for others, is for them to develop like a moral compass, right? We want everybody to have a conscience. We want everybody to feel accountable. And not to me, right, as a father or as a friend, I'm not always going to be there, right? Like, I might pass tomorrow, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala preserve and protect us all. But at the end of the day, like, I'm not always going to be there. And I want to make sure that my son, daughter, friend, brother, whoever it might be, I want them to be successful even in my absence. And even if I'm living, does it mean that I'm going to be 24 hours standing on somebody's head? I can't, right? Like, I have my own issues and my own problems to worry about. Creating independence is a goal, that's something that we should always be working toward and working for. So there are 8 reasons for concealing sins, and we had gone through all 8 of them. But it's important for us to understand that we have to work at the least on displaying obedience. Why? Because we want to set a good example. And we need to hide sin for the same reason, right? This can become dangerous, and it can be hypocrisy if we're doing it just for this. Oh man, I keep pressing the wrong button. If we just do it for this reason. But if I'm doing it because I want to set an example, this is something that's healthy. And if I'm doing it just because I want people to think I'm pious, this is a problem. This is focus on the action, and this is focus on the self. Does that make sense? Because I'm setting an example not as a person, but I'm setting an example to do this specific action, versus showing piety where I want people not to think of the action, I want people to think of me. And this is a very easy doorway and a very easy pathway to hypocrisy. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us. So if you ask, is it permissible for a servant to love people's praise for their righteousness and to love them because of it? What do you guys think? You should, but remember, he's asking a very basic question. Is it permissible?
Like their own righteousness?
Yeah, so like, people praise me and I'm like, man, it's actually kind of nice. Is that okay? It's not? So a man once asked the Prophet ﷺ, guide me to an act that will make Allah love me and people love me. And I want you guys to listen to the Prophet ﷺ's answer. He said, renounce this world and Allah will love you. And disengage yourself from what people possess and they will love you. Meaning that seeking people's love is what? It's fine. How do we know that? He said it right here. And they will love you. Like, if this is what you want, this is the way to get it. Had it been haram, what would the Prophet ﷺ have said? He said no. He said this isn't even something you should be striving for. It's not something you should work at. Because at the end of the day, even with this, like here, let me put it this way. Who doesn't want to be loved? Is there anyone who's like, no, I want people to hate me. I want people to really dislike me. And what's an easy way to be hated and despised and disliked? Start cursing others. Start putting them down. Right? Start abusing people. This is a very easy way to be hated. Start lying all the time. Right? These are very easy ways to be hated. But to be loved, what's interesting about this idea of being loved by others is that if I chase after people's love, will I attain it? Usually not. People will see through it. Will I get some people to love me? Yeah, sure. But will I get people to love me? No, I won't. And what's interesting here is that how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He connects this love with possessions. Meaning that the more I remove myself from this dunya, and the more I remove myself from these possessions, and the more I remove myself from all of this luxury.
Example on that, disengage yourself from people. Disengage, like how?
From what? Not from people,
Not
from their possessions.
Dunya.
From their dunya stuff, man. Like, show no interest in the things that they own. Say, oh, I got a new car, mashallah. That's nice.
Is it only possessions? Could it also be like characteristics?
No, I mean, if I'm interested in somebody's courage, like why? Because I want to be courageous. Right? If I'm interested in somebody's kindness, it's because I want to emulate that. But being interested in someone's car, right, it's like, oh man, where'd you get this? And blah, blah, you know what I mean? Why? What happens? Even though the person might show happiness that you like their car, what's happening internally for many of us? Huh? Right, we start getting a little bit jealous, like, yo, what is this? He's standing a little too close to my car, right? Or it's like, man, you've been playing with my phone for a minute now. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it that you like it, but disengaging yourself from their possessions, right? These things that they own, these worldly things. Why? Because if I'm not interested in those things, how does it make the relationship between me and that person? It becomes more genuine because the person knows I'm not interested in that car. I'm actually interested in him and the individual, inshallah. But because it's raining, we're probably going to combine Maghrib and Isha, and it'll be a little bit late when we come back. From next week, class will be after Salat al-Maghrib. All right, from next week, class will be after Maghrib, inshallah. But I'll see you guys next week, inshallah. Subhanakallah, hamdika wa shalla anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair.
الله أكبر. الحمد لله رب العالمين.